Rotowire at the perfect draft for those picking number 2 in 2025 12-team fantasy football snake drafts. With pick number 2, you can go with running back Bijan Robinson or wide receiver Jamar Chase. However, because the way running backs typically fall in ordinary drafts, the running back is my preferred play because getting wide receiver depth is going to be a little easier than getting running back depth. But if Jamar Chase does fall to that number 2 pick, which he will in some drafts, definitely we can make adjustments on the fly, which brings us to our next pair of picks, which would be pick 23 and 26. And with those picks, you will have an option. Josh Jacobs pretty much falls in most drafts to that range. Super safe, very high floor, reasonable ceiling as well. If Jacobs does somehow get snapped up off the board, he goes a little later, but Breece Hall is the player you may want to invest in. Remember, Breece Hall had a disappointing last year, but he was commonly the number 1 or number 2 running back off the board in 2024. But Breece Hall was in an interview, and he explained that he played the year through a sprained MCL. That's enough for me because there was no other reason to understand why his season was poor. He was a superstar in his first year before hurting his knee, superstar in the second year after hurting his knee. So last year, we'll throw it out due to injury. Breece Hall would be a great fallback. Now, get a wide receiver with these pair of picks as well. You can choose most likely from the trio of Garrett Wilson, Davante Adams, or Jackson Smith-Njigba. Garrett Wilson should have the highest floor among these receivers. Davante Adams, he's going to be playing with Puka Nacua over in Los Angeles, so that one could be a little interesting, but he should have a reasonable floor if Wilson's gone. Jackson Smith-Njigba could see 160 targets this year. So there is definitely merit to look at Smith-Njigba here as well. My favorite is Garrett Wilson, but again, you might have a different flavor, and that is fine. So you get the picks 47 and 50. And at this point, if you followed my advice with Bijan Robinson, you have 2 running backs and a receiver. At 47 and 50, you can flip this script to make it 2 more wide receivers to give you 3. And the players you would likely be picking from in these spots: Devontae Smith, who missed some games last year, so his stats didn't look good, but on a per-game basis, he's just fine. George Pickens of the Dallas Cowboys. The defense is probably going to be bad for a while. They have some injuries, spillover from last year. Dak Prescott's going to have to throw the ball. The running game probably not going to be very good, so Pickens has a real potential for upside. Calvin Ridley. Ridley's a player, 2 straight 1,000-yard seasons. The offensive line should be a little better in Tennessee, and of course, a little quarterback upgrade in Cam Ward. And look, Jalen Waddle's a player we may not always be excited about, but with Jonnu Smith no longer with the team, there could be an increase in Waddle's targets back to the levels we saw in earlier years in his career. If you're enjoying this breakdown, take a second to hit like and subscribe. It helps us keep the fantasy advice coming. If you want even more of Rotowire's tools, rankings, and insights, we got a 15% discount just for our YouTube viewers. You head to rotowire.com, choose your subscription, and use the code YouTube15 at checkout. All right, at this point, if you're following the perfect draft from the number 2 spot, you are rostering 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers. We have a plan for quarterback. We're going to wait. The roster build we're going to make here is going to give us depth at running back, depth at receiver, allow us to withstand an injury or 2 or some bye weeks. So we are going to take value later. So let's get to pick 71 and 74. I recommend both 1 wide receiver and 1 running back. In pick 71 to 74, Jerry Jeudy. Remember, Jerry Jeudy had that breakout year last year, averaging 10.3 targets in the second half of the season. Yeah, he dropped some passes, but he is going to be a PPR machine. If that doesn't work out, Jacoby Myers should continue to be heavily targeted in Las Vegas. At running back, a choice of 3. Quinshon Judkins of the Cleveland Browns, second-round pick. Could be a 3-down back. I definitely am bullish on Judkins. But if you just want to go with established volume, DeAndre Swift of the Bears could be your choice because the Bears really don't have a competitive backfield beyond Swift. And Swift should see improvement behind a very good offensive line and potentially a good passing attack. Tony Pollard would be another fallback option. Pollard played exceptionally well behind a bad line last year, but that Tennessee line does look to have some improvement potential here. And even though Pollard's in a timeshare with Tyjae Spears, Pollard looked very good last year. So again, a running back and a receiver here. You get to picks 95 and 98. Now we want to make sure we get the quarterback position. And it's possible Baker Mayfield slides. He goes very close here, but if he slides, definitely the passing volume is great. Dak Prescott. Remember, in 3 of the last 5 years, he's been the quarterback 2, 3, and 7. He's had some injury-plagued seasons, but right now, as it stands in Dallas, with your bet on health, Dak Prescott could be a phenomenal option. Or you could go with the rushing upside of Justin Fields here. Remember, a few years ago, 1,143 rushing yards. Now with the Jets, he'll probably be turned loose again. Now, with the 98th pick, we're going to either go tight end or flex, whichever your preference is. Tight ends, Mark Andrews, he's being ignored this year, and the targets weren't great, but very, very productive. If your flavor is Evan Ingram, probably available here, so you can get a tight end. But if you want to wait a little longer on tight end, you can go to that flex spot. You can here you'd have choices. Jalen Warren of the Steelers certainly will be involved in that Arthur Smith offense. Travis Etienne, if you're betting on a bounce back with Liam Cohen as the coach. Or you could even look at Keon Coleman. Remember, Keon Coleman, through week 7 last year, was starting to really come on, but he chipped a bone in his wrist. And when he returned, he was not much of a factor anymore. But if you wanted a wide receiver there. So at that point, whether you went tight end or flex, at your pick 119 and 122, which is the 10th and 11th round, you'll come back. And if you didn't take a tight end, here you'll have your choice of David Njoku. And if Joe Flacco's a starter, remember, Njoku was the tight end 1 in the last 5 games of 2023 he played with Flacco. Or Jake Ferguson. I keep pointing out that Dallas passing attack. And if you want to stack up a team, the Dallas passing game is a nice place to start. If you took the tight end in the earlier pick, the 8th and 9th round, you'll come back and go flex. And here you could get J.K. Dobbins, who right now looks like he has a good chance of having a little workload advantage over R.J. Harvey, being the great Denver offense or their offensive line. Christian Kirk, you'll take a chance that he's going to be the clear slot receiver for C.J. Stroud. Or running back depth, Ramondre Stevenson, right now projected to be ahead of Travion Henderson. We'll see. Or Tyjae Spears. Remember, he mixes in well with Tony Pollard. Those are 11 rounds of the draft, and that's as far as you go with the perfect draft. A lot of variables after that. Of course, you would fill depth spots after that. But again, hopefully you enjoyed the perfect draft from the number 2 spot in 2025 fantasy football drafts.